Hello, everyone, and welcome. A very good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on wherever you're tuning in from. A warm welcome to everyone joining us. A pleasure to be your moderator for today's session. And the title of our session is Beyond GDP of the Sea, Capturing Social and Cultural Values in Ocean Governance. So this dialogue is part of a broader effort to reimagine how we protect and manage our oceans. And we're here today to explore how we ensure that our blue economies are being measured not just by economic output, but by their ability to sustain the vibrant and culturally rich ocean communities. So for far too long, the story of our oceans has been told primarily through numbers such as economic yields and ecological metrics. While essential, these figures don't tell the whole story of the ocean communities. There are often traditions, the spiritual connections with the oceans, and the identities of these communities. So this session is about looking beyond these traditional metrics, and it's also about telling the stories of these invisible communities. So the central question that the panelists will be discussing today is how do we make the invisible visible, and how do we integrate these profound social and cultural dimensions into regional and national policies in order to, of course, create a future that is fair, inclusive, and grounded on community realities. So guiding us through this session is someone from the University of Malaysia Terengganu, Dr. Kyra Ismail, whose work who champions interdisciplinary approaches as we move this conversation forward. And Kyra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cheryl. And hello, everyone. Thank you very much for setting the stage for this discussion. And good afternoon from Kuala Lumpur. And also good afternoon, good morning to colleagues joining from Sydney, Cheryl in Suva, and others. So I'm Farah Ismail. I'll be moderating this session on Beyond GDP of the Sea, Capturing Social and Cultural Values in Ocean Governance. Our session today explores how we can move beyond purely economic and ecological metrics and instead capture the life realities, cultural identities, and social well-being that truly define sustainable ocean governance. I will walk you through the flow of this webinar. We will have our three distinguished speakers to present their topic for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then we'll then reconvene to have a panel discussion on some of the questions. And you also are invited to write your questions in the chat box so that we can also ask your questions to the panelists. So I will introduce our first speaker, Dr. Liz O'Neill from Stockholm Resilience Centre. She brings expertise in small-scale fisheries, seafood value chains, and participatory well-being metrics that can inform ocean accounts. Her work shows how community-generated data can guide national decision-making and reveals trade-off across governance scales. Her current research focuses on integrating the social-economic dimensions of small-scale fisheries into policy frameworks to support fair and sustainable ocean governance. Hello, Dr. Liz. So
Hello.
can we, so the floor is yours for you to present. Can we
Thank
have
you.
presentation? Yeah. Okay.
I wait for the slides to come up, is it?
Yeah, I think Cheryl, is the slide. Can we have the slide?
Can you see the slides?
Yep, I can.
Slide number
Let
2.
me see.
Yeah.
Maybe I have to. I just see you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I think it's starting to load now. Oh no. coming. Thanks. So hi everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Liz, based here in Stockholm at the Resilience Centre, which is like a part of Stockholm University. And today I was just going to chat to you about the project I'm working on right now, so you can get a flavour. I don't work directly with ocean accounts at all, but more the social and cultural values in small scale fisheries and markets and trade. Next slide, please. There's a delay, sorry. Now here it comes. So this is the project that I'm currently working on, and I'm funded by Formas, which is like the Swedish Sustainable Development Agency. So it's a collaboration with the University of Philippines Visayas in Iloilo and Stockholm University. And this project is kind of like the leftovers of my PhD, which is looking at patronage relations and social relations and seafood markets and trade. So it's about kind of rethinking patron-client relationships in small-scale fishing communities. And it's in collaboration with Alice Frere, Simon West, who's at Australian National University, and other people based in the US and Sweden. Next. I just present you my 3 work packages so you can get an understanding of the type of things that I'm working on and how I'm going about integrating and unpacking the social cultural values of the seascape space. So I'm in the middle of work package 1 at the moment, which uses interpretive social science to understand what patronage is and the meanings it has for people who live it every day in the seafood trade and market sphere. Work package 2 is also finishing up right now, which was looking at or using behavioral economic experiments to test decision making when it comes to fishing and finance and debt in response to change, so an environmental change or shock to the system. And then my last work package I'm about to go and do in January to May in Iloilo, which is all about participatory scenario planning to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly of patron-client relationships and future seafood market systems and how people want or imagine them. So all of this work is based in Iloilo in Conception, where I've been working like on and off since 2014. Next slide, please. So I just give a flavor of the first kind of output or academic output, I should say, of this project, which has taken a long time because the project started in 2023 and I just submitted last week or the week before my first paper from the project, which mainly comes from work package 1, which is called From Control to Care in Small Scale Fisheries. So a grounded theory of suki patronage relationships in the Philippines. And when I say care, I mean like a care-based approach to ocean governance, which came from feminist ethics and philosophy, but also it's very interdisciplinary now. And the idea of care in ocean governance came from the fisher folks themselves, because it's how they talked about how they go about their livelihoods and accept the variability and like unpredictability in their systems. Next slide, please. Thanks. I think you have to press. Oh, it's gone. So I just was going to introduce you to like the way I went about this first work package, like the methodology, which is based on kind of 2 things. Can you click twice for me? So I've been creating a grounded theory of Suki and I that form a lot of the Philippine marketplaces and especially like the seafood marketplace. And for me, I've seen a grounded theory as a way to like theorize a creative, imaginative way that you can use to describe social processes that fit or work for those who live the processes. And I've been doing this through this interpretive approach, which is really about trying to unpack how people construct meanings or understandings from their social worlds and experiences, and how that in turn shapes actions and institutions. So a way to like understand human behavior that's grounded in like the vocabulary and words of the people that are in the phenomenon of interest. Next slide, thanks. Sorry, that's a delay. I think it's my internet. So this is just some of the process of this first paper, which involved 2 extensive like fieldwork trips in Iloilo and different types of ordinary language interviewing, both with couples, like dyadic interviews with husbands and wives and spouses and partners, but also individual interpretive interviews. And then another field trip which involved co-analysis, so bringing back all of the first steps of this grounded theory about like what is patronage in this system, and co-analyzing it together, using other types of methods like photo voice to create like the final output or the final grounded theory of what patron-client relationships are and how they work and what they do. So what they can mean for people dealing with different types of changes, be it either environmental or new market opportunities or market shocks. So how do these social relationships work and what they do in that context, basically. And this is the white guy is Simon West, who was like our interpretive coach from the Australian National University. And then I also had my family with me both times. So it's been some fun work. And we're about to go back as well in January. Next slide. This is just a sample of what the kind of results look like from this type of work, or I guess the way I've been trying to pick apart these social and cultural values. So it's kind of like lifting the hood or like popping the hood of how these social and cultural values like play out in the market sphere. So basically I have these socio-cultural concepts on the top, which are then explained by the practices, or like co-constituted by the practices on the bottom, which can be buyer orientated. So like the patron or the trader or the broker buying the seafood, or seller orientated, which is all to do with like the person selling, who could be the fisher, but also another type of trader, a small scale trader. So basically these processes on the bottom, like caring, entertaining, connecting or building patron-client relationships, changing relationships, ending the relationship, they're explained or affected by the socio-cultural concepts on the top, which are described using the root words in Hiligaynon. And they explain the practices or how the market relationships work in either constraining, enabling, obligating, or reinforcing ways. So for example, you can see some of the concept on top. So this came from the co-analysis and the multiple like fieldwork steps. These were the key kind of concepts that came up that explained the relationships and how the market worked according to the fisher folk in the system. So for example, you could present yourself as pitiful, or you could have a trader that felt pity, which is luoi, the kind of reddish circle. And in this, luoi enabled price making in a way that benefited the seller. So you could start to understand how different outputs of the market came to be according to these different socio-cultural concepts. So salig is trust, luoi, pity, intindi, like understanding, huya, like shame or shyness, utang na kabalaslan, which is like a debt of gratitude, a debt on the inside. So that's just a taste of the kind of things that we came up with. Next slide. That's all I have to say. I just wanted to give you a flavor of what I'm working with at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Liz, thank you for the insightful glimpse of your work in Philippines, and we can see how like the relationship, this patronage, and also the social relationship and decision-making structure, how that actually shaped the livelihood on the ground itself. So building on that, we'll turn to Dr. Vera Horigue, whose work looks at how these human connections intersect with marine conservation planning and governance networks across tropical seascapes. Dr. Vera is a marine conservation scientist with over 15 years of experience working with governments and communities to strengthen marine conservation and coastal governance. She specializes in tropical seascapes, focusing on marine protected areas, conservation planning, political ecology. Her research shows how social-ecological network data can guide equitable and effective management, and how governance linkages can be incorporated into planning frameworks. Dr. Vera, please share your insights, and the slide is already.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's already there. Thank you.
Yeah, it's wherever you
Hello.
go.
Could we go back just to introduce? Cheryl is so excited. But hello, everyone, and thank you to Kyra from the University of Malaysia, Terengganu, and Cheryl from Dr. Cheryl Fernandez Abila from the University of New South Wales Centre for Sustainable Development Reform and the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Vera Horigue, a research fellow at the Spatial Decisions Group at Macquarie University. And as Kyra mentioned earlier, I've been working over the past years with governments and communities, specifically in the Philippines and in the Western Indian Ocean region, to design marine protected area networks and transboundary conservation areas. So like Liz, I don't work on ocean accounts, but I utilize, collate, and gather a lot of spatial and non-spatial data for marine conservation planning. And for my talk today, I just wanted to share a few lessons from my experience, particularly around the importance of integrating social and governance dimensions early in the design process. Well, there are many factors that influence the success of marine conservation areas. Governance is often the linchpin, and if we consider it from the start, it can make all the difference. So next slide, please. All right. So similar to Liz, I'll start my talk and ground this discussion with an example from the Philippines, where I'm also from originally. So when local marine protected areas were first established there, they were mostly designed as isolated or individual MPAs, which are managed independently by local governments due to our decentralized government system. But over time, and in some cases with support and encouragement from bridging organizations, neighboring local government units began forming alliances to coordinate planning and enforcement of fishing grounds and across multiple MPAs. So these alliances didn't just scale up conservation in the country, but they also improved site level management, fostered learning, and built trust among neighboring local governments, communities, and also institutions. And what we saw was that while ecological design provided the foundation, but it was governance, particularly leadership, participation, and shared objectives that determined how well these MPA networks performed, or these local government alliances performed. So this experience helped shape how we think about MPA networks, not just as ecological systems, but as social and governance systems too. Next slide, please. So building on that Philippine experience, what we've learned is that while individual MPAs are powerful tools for local conservation, but when they're connected through social and governance networks, they can amplify protection, enforcement, and learning across jurisdictions. And governance features like leadership, participation, and trust are what sustains coordination across MPAs and also improves network performance. And again, I mentioned earlier that yes, ecological design gives us the blueprint, but governance is what brings it to life and keeps it functioning. So the alliances didn't just improve individual sites. It's also because of the amplified enforcement, the shared learning, and the expanded protection across jurisdictions that kind of that perform synergistically, so which help contribute to more effective outcomes. And it's not just about having institutions in place, it's also about the governance diversity, engaging different actors, aligning incentives, and having clear shared objectives as well. So these are the ingredients that we found that contributed to durable and effective networks in the Philippines. But looking at on the other side of the world, governance must also reflect lived realities of coastal communities. And that means integrating community well-being, traditional practices, and intergenerational justice into both the design and evaluation of NPAs. So in my work in the Western Indian Ocean, particularly in the transboundary conservation area or the transboundary conservation region in the, between Kenya and Tanzania, we've seen that institutional asymmetries and socioeconomic differences aren't just background conditions. They are design constraints that must be addressed from the outset in order for transboundary conservation to be more successful. And one promising approach that's been being discussed as well, actually, in the WEO is through the ocean accounts, which offer a framework that can integrate social and economic values into conservation planning. However, it's still quite new, and particularly for me, I'm also still not fully aware of its use and its method. So I'm wondering about its limitations and particularly how it could consider equity and also cultural values, which are also important in conservation planning. So I guess I'll end this talk by asking the question that how do we also ensure that equity and cultural heritage are also treated as core indicators and not just as nice to haves in marine conservation planning and also in ocean accounting. That's it for me. Again, thank you to the organizers. Yes, I'll pass it.
Thank you, Vera. That's very on time.
Okay, thank you.
So let's see if Becca can ask that. So continuing on that theme of integration, we'll hear from Dr. Rebecca Shellock, who takes this further by embedding social and cultural values directly into ocean accounting frameworks through social accounts. Dr. Rebecca Shellock from University of New South Wales is an interdisciplinary marine scientist specializing in marine social science. She integrates social and cultural values into ocean accounting framework through social accounts and coordinates pilot projects in Costa Rica, Belize, Maldives, and Mozambique under Global Ocean Accounting Partnership GoUp, advancing methods to capture community well-being, cultural ties, and livelihood in ocean governance. Dr. Becca, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you. So today I'll give you a really quick overview of the work that we're doing in the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership to integrate social, cultural values and information into ocean accounts. So next slide, please. Thanks, Cheryl. So we increasingly know that social and cultural values, we know they're being measured both kind of in the academic literature, but also in the grey literature. And there's a recent study that just got published. So James Delbene, who led this paper, and they looked at the range of different kind of literatures out there, did a systematic map to see kind of what papers were out there measuring social and cultural values. And the work identified there was over like 262 papers in the peer-reviewed literature that measured social cultural values. So it really shows that there's increasingly like a big interest in social cultural values and how to measure them. So what we can see though is that there has been some kind of use of this data within local decision making. So there's been integration of those social cultural values, and those have helped to influence local decision making. But implementation is like very, very fragmented, and it can very much occur on a case-by-case basis. So we know that like this type of data often doesn't get incorporated into national level decision making. And there's a few different reasons for this. So we know that the data, for example, hasn't been synthesized, it hasn't been standardized, and it hasn't got that spatial link either. And that can make it really, really difficult for it to be used in national level decision making. And ocean accounts will really help us to do that. So we'll help to standardize this social data, enable spatial mapping of social data, and that will make it more useful for decision making. So GoApp is helping to support the delivery of social accounts. So when I talk about social accounts, that's the integration of social, cultural, and equity data into the ocean accounting framework. And through social accounts, we really want to make sure that communities are more visible in the framework, particularly those minoritized groups. We also want to make sure that local knowledge is used effectively within social accounts. And we really want to understand how kind of different costs and benefits are distributed across different groups. So who are the winners and losers when it comes to the ocean economy, ocean health, for example. Next slide, please. So social accounts are a very new aspect of the ocean accounts framework, which provides a really great opportunity for everyone to be involved and to collaborate in the development of its framework. And I just want to talk a little bit about kind of two ways in which social information can be fed into the ocean accounts framework. So I'm going to talk about two different entry points. So the first entry point I'm going to talk about is social conditions, or our stocks. So social conditions help us to provide us with a demographic overview or a snapshot of particular communities at a point in time. And they can capture particular variables like income, education, gender, age, for example. But you can also look at other variables as well, kind of like social vulnerability. You can look at social inclusion and poverty, for example. And just looking at the example you can see on the right-hand side. So you can see a spatial map of Lamu Atoll in the Maldives. So what you could do is you could look back at 2024, bring together some social information on those particular populations. And you could also then combine that with a spatial map. And from doing this, you can get a snapshot of what's happening in that community at that point in time. So you can understand what the gender balance was in that community, the income, poverty levels, vulnerability and resilience. And then what you can do is you can put that social information together with more physical environmental data. And that can really help you when it comes to disaster management and mitigation, because combining that social information together with that environmental information can really help you to understand who will be most at risk when there'll be floods or storms, for example. And that helps with policy interventions and planning. Next slide, please. And so I just want to talk a little bit about entry point 2, so social activities or flows. So there's a lot of different economic activities that are accounted for within our national accounting systems and also our ocean accounts. But there's so many activities that aren't currently being captured because they don't have economic transactions. But they're still really important and they need visibility within ocean accounts. And these are particularly the kind of unpaid activities that makes ocean-based economic activities possible in coastal communities. So as you can kind of see on the right-hand side, just to give you an example. So a fisher might go offshore and catch fish for household consumption. So that's an economic activity. We know there's a monetary value associated with that. But there's so many other social activities that are happening that enable that fisher to go offshore. For example, whilst that fisher goes offshore, someone will have to kind of help with adult or elder care, look after children, for example. When that fish comes in to shore, they'll have to help with food preparation and processing, including cleaning, cooking, and preserving. And also to enable that fish to go out, there'll have to be some maintenance of the boats and net repair for that household consumption. So by looking at social activities, we can see kind of what activities are happening during a time period and really bring out those more invisible activities that aren't currently being captured, but are really important to the ocean economy and ocean health. Next slide, please. So I've talked a little bit about kind of the theory underpinning social accounts, but just to say that this framework is still developing. And really what we're trying to do is test this in practice. So we have a few pilots across the world. So in Costa Rica, Belize, Mozambique, and the Maldives. And these pilots are being led by our local partners. So it's locally led, making sure there's local leadership through partnerships of national organisations and in-country expertise. And this approach builds on local capacity, but also ensures that the social accounts that is being developed are tailored to that local context and creates that local ownership as well. And at the moment, we're developing the pilots between now and March next year. And what we're hoping with the pilots and through social accounts, that social accounts can be something that's really flexible. They can have a modular design. So it means that they can be customized to the social cultural context in question, as well as the country's requirements and priorities. And it can also be quite adaptable based on what data is available in country and the technical capacity as well within the country. So across these different countries, there'll be some kind of core modules, which countries will measure, but there'll also be some specialized blocks, which can kind of be increased and added as capacity and needs develop. And I just wanted to show kind of the process at the moment. So we're going through with the pilots. So as you can kind of see, there's kind of 6 or 7 main stages. This is it's like more of an iterative process. It's not a straight line, but this is kind of the process that the pilots are going through at the moment. So in terms of the process, our pilot partners are looking at co-design. So the first stage of the process is to really look at what stakeholders and communities to bring in and co-design the social account with those stakeholders. And that makes sure that it's tailored to the local context and to policy needs. The second stage is around data inventory. So we know there's lots and lots of social data out there, and we're really focusing on, looking at that social data that's already there and existing and bringing it in to produce a social account. Then the third stage is kind of bringing all that data together to produce that social account. And we're doing a number of these social accounts and we're producing dashboards to make them more visual, to show kind of what data is there and what it's showing. And there's so much fatigue that's happening within communities. So during the consultation phase, we make sure to use these dashboards, and they're kind of centered to that consultation to show communities, to show decision makers and stakeholders what data is already available. And that can also help to show them what might be missing. So what about their relationship with the ocean is missing, and what groups are missing from current data. Then using that consultation, those insights, the social account dashboard is then refined and improved. And then the 6th stage is going back to them through a validation workshop and showing them kind of the dashboard and how it's been improved based on their feedback and thoughts. And just to say that we've obviously got these pilots across the 4 countries, and this will be central to helping to develop the technical guidance. So we want to make sure that we're drawing on those expertise and those experiences, and all of that knowledge will be used to develop that technical guidance that countries around the world can use to build their own social accounts. So hopefully I've just given you a snapshot into the work that we're doing at the moment. And just to say thank you so much for your attention today. Next slide, please. And I think the most valuable insights will really emerge from our partners who are leading the pilots at the moment. And they're really pioneering the path forward in this space. And we're looking forward to sharing some more of the findings over the coming months as these pilot programs advance and generate learning. So stay tuned for more updates as we learn more from these pilots. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Becca. I will be also excited to know about the updates of those pilot studies. So that concludes all the 3 concise presentation. Thank you to all speakers. Each one of you have like different highlights and different topics in terms of looking into how do we integrate social data into decision-making process. So we'll now start, we'll open the floor for short panel dialogues and also audience reflections. If you have any questions, you may type your questions in the chat and I'll invite our speakers to respond. But before that, we'll start with the first questions to all of you. So across your work, we can see creative efforts to bring social realities into formal systems. What are some of the promising approach or good practices that you've already perhaps do it yourself, or maybe you have observed some other people who do it before you? And have you found for transforming community stories or qualitative insights into data or evidence that policymakers actually engage with? I know Rebecca have touched a bit on that, but maybe maybe you can start with Liz or Vera to answer the first question. Liz, would you like to start first? What are some of the promising approach or good practices that you see can transform a community's qualitative insight into data or evidence for policymakers to engage with?
I would say like good practices, or what I've been kind of trying to look around and get into more recently, was like these kind of grounding frameworks or metrics that are used so that they make sense to like the stakeholders directly related to them. So like just looking at how the social account pilots are designed, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like co-designing with people at forums, with trained facilitators, going with the grains of the values that are kind of like existing in the different sites that will be impacted by whatever ocean governance decision is made, and choosing, I guess, suitable indicators for those different seascape contexts. So it really rung true to me, like that modularity that you were talking about, Rebecca, because I always wonder like how like specific or standardized can you be? So it makes a lot of sense that you have the space to like not get into the standardization, but make it contextual, but maybe comparable and representative across like different places. Yeah, I'll keep my answer short.
Vera, do you have any?
Just to add to that, because in terms of our personal practice within the research teams, both in the Philippines, the teams that work in the Philippines and in the Western Indian Ocean, is engaging and bringing in community members in forums so that they can also personally tell those stories. And those forums also include multi-sectoral stakeholders, so including governments as well. And that also helps them, express themselves a bit more effectively. And then in terms of like planning processes, we try to, as much as possible, to have use as best practice to apply participatory planning processes. So for example, getting information using maps, and then also just applying like co-design approaches as well when you're implementing the project, so that way you can engage the communities, and for us as well in the Philippines, for example, local governments in every step of the process of the project, so from the design to the implementation and even at the end, so that way they also take ownership of the project, and they also communicate to the community members that have been engaged in the project, also communicate with other community members. So I guess that's it.
Becca, anything to add on?
So I think those are very good answers. I think in terms of adding, obviously we discussed co-design through the work that we're doing with social accounts, but I think particularly in terms of good practice, having free, prior and informed consent. So I think with the ocean account space, it's good not to assume that people want their local knowledge incorporated. So it's making sure that we're checking the communities first as to whether they want their knowledge to be incorporated into processes, and how to do that. So I think in addition, like the care principles as well, having ethical safeguards and making sure there's community control. So making sure they've got authority over their knowledge and data, and having transparent communication protocols and engagement strategies as well. And that's been quite central in terms of thinking about social accounts. And I think even particularly more so when thinking about Indigenous and local knowledge and how to bring and incorporate those into ocean accounts and ocean governance.
So you said that something about like the local have consented as well to be included, right? So have you had any experience where there's like hesitation or like an actual no to like, to be part or to engage in this exercise?
Not so far. So we're starting the consultation. So our in-country partners will be starting consultations in the pilot areas between November and December this year. So I can't speak to that, but I'll be able to let you know how it goes very soon.
Oh, so we have a question actually in the chat box for Dr. Liz. So this one builds directly on the framing of a patron-client relationship, a system that both enable and constrain. The question asked here is, when new funding streams, for example, philanthropy-driven or blended finance initiatives like Rare Fish Forever in Indonesia are introduced into this coastal system, how do they interact with existing patron-client relationship? Do such programs genuinely empower communities by diversifying their safety nets, or do they risk creating a new form of dependency or obligation? Yeah, so maybe Dr. Liz can respond, and if Vera and Rebecca would like also to share whether this similar tension appear in conservation governance or social accounting context, if you have worked on it. Yeah, so Dr. Liz.
Thanks for the question. And it's something that I've been like thinking about like for the duration of this project. And I feel like the patron-client relationships, they're not something that you can replace. Like there's something that like are the building blocks now of how the market or fisheries networks kind of work and how they function. I feel like they can be worked around or worked with. So that goes back to like my idea of like going with the grain. It's not something like this middleman link that you can go and try and like bypass, because they're there and they've lasted and persisted for so long because they're flexible, they're adaptive. The fishers can turn to them not only for sources of like finance for fishing, but also for school supplies, for hospital and healthcare reasons. So they persist and evolve for a reason, because they kind of support the fisher folk in ways that formal finance can't ever do, but they can, of course, be integrated into them. So there's lots of different kind of like saving schemes or microfinance schemes that exist alongside and with patronage relations, but they're not often the ones that are chosen when shocks to the system like can happen due to like the nature of what's needed to be involved in them and when you can actually access the finance, which is in a less flexible kind of way. So I feel like it's about going with the grain of how these kind of social relationships already work and thinking of ways that like maybe it's not the relationship itself, but maybe it's like the debt, the financial debt that people might find themselves in. So maybe somehow weakening that debt by, for example, going outside of like the fishery sphere and seeing that the needed finances for like school supplies, it's for bugas, for rice. So like coming at it from like that way and working with it to like loosen the obligation in a way that doesn't disrupt how the networks and relationships have been set up and working.
Okay, so maybe Ms. Dr. Vera, do you want to add anything to that or no?
No.
Okay.
I don't feel like I know enough about the suke,
Okay.
except for my own suke relationship.
Okay, so actually there's a question also for you, Dr. Vera. So in the context where financing is increasingly tied to performance metrics, how can governance frameworks ensure that local communities are not just implementers, but co-designers?
This is a good question. Particularly, I think in terms of conservation planning, we do have a participatory framework, and I've also worked on adapting the systematic conservation planning framework to the Philippine context, which I'm also using now as I'm working in the Western Indian Ocean. So in this framework, yeah, we've adopted it to also engage local communities in the process. So creating and platforms for them as well, for communities. So going into the communities, trying to understand what their potential, their interests, their values as well. So to integrate that into the conservation plans. So that way, they take more ownership of the conservation plan as well. So that they're not just planning it. And it's also because in previous processes, which often become more a bit opportunistic, so to speak, oftentimes, yeah, they just normally, okay, here's the MPA design. could you evaluate and say, oh, this is okay or this is not okay? But now we've kind of changed that by adapting that participatory process, that we engage them at the beginning and take them through that process as well. So we normally have like two to three planning workshops at different levels to engage people at different levels and different kinds of stakeholders. So that way it's more, you really engage people in the co-design process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I think with local here as well in Malaysia, it's often like that. We try our best to make sure that it's co-designed, but then sometimes it's also difficult because there is a tendency of perhaps we think that we kind of like know better more than the people who actually live there, who has been there. So I think it takes a lot of continuous communication and a
Yeah.
lot of like dialogues and also engagement throughout. Okay, so Becca, do you want to add anything to that? Maybe some things that you have also engaged through where you were doing your pilot accounts?
Nothing to add to this one.
Okay, so there's also one question here. How to integrate equity in decision making, and how do you think this relationship with the ocean can shape this decision? Any one of you would like to take it first? Yeah, okay, Becca.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one to start with. So in terms of equity is a really, really key aspect to the social accounts. So thinking about justice, equity, and inclusion. And I think particularly when we're thinking about some of those kind of core building blocks, like social inclusion, as well as kind of poverty, vulnerability and resilience, food and nutrition security, we're kind of seeing those as like some of the core building blocks. So I think that will help to ensure that equity is a very, very clear lens throughout the social accounts. And we're making sure that that information is available so that it can feed into decision making. And again, by doing kind of the social accounts, bringing in data and perspectives from communities that have been marginalized. So I think, yeah, being able to have the social accounts will help to contribute to that and ensure that there's more of an equitable lens to decision making and governance. That's the hope.
Okay. And I see Vera, you have some comments, no?
Equity is actually very tricky, but yeah, there's also, I guess it's more of just thinking about this aloud too, is there's also different dimensions to it. And you can also look at it from the perspective of communities and even local governments. I also mentioned local governments because I think they're also very critical. And then at the same time, being local, they're also part of a community because they have like, they wear two hats. But in terms of my experience as well is that, yeah, when you're working with local governments with different levels of social, economic, conditions and attributes as well, or especially if it's very different, then that's when there's a lot more tension and potential conflict that arises. Whereas I find that, yeah, if the local governments or communities are more equal in the sense or are more similar, and that's when there's a bit more, they work together better. So in terms of the experience, then yes, it's good to also really think about that, but then also like how we think about our messaging, particularly for those situations and contexts that are really disparate and different. Because at the end of the day, if for me, particularly for conservation, right, we want to produce like a plan that's helpful for both and communities, and it's also equitable for both communities or contexts as well. So yeah, it's more of like a thought. I haven't quite figured out the answer, but it's also, yeah, like just to help increase awareness as well. Like how do we handle those differences?
Yes, yeah. I think it's often like that. Yeah, I mean, like, obviously they have like different kind of priorities, like in terms of communities and also local government. So So one more question to Becca. As new framework like ocean accounts aim to capture social and cultural values, how can we ensure that indicators of well-being and equity are not treated as add-ons, but a core metric alongside economic and ecological indicators? I kind of like resonate as well to this question, because somehow I feel that with social accounts, it's always an afterthought more than, you know, the first thing when actually human matters most. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, very good question. So I think previously there wasn't so much visibility of marine social science, but I think there's increasing acknowledgement of the importance of the field and the importance of bringing that social, cultural, and equity information into ocean decision making. So I think that hopefully we'll keep moving beyond that, so that social science isn't seen as an add-on or an afterthought at the end of another project. So with kind of social being one of the key tenets or one of the key domains of ocean accounts, like that will be it seeing on like the same kind of level, the same level of importance as that economic and that environmental information. And through ocean accounts, we'll be able to really draw that link from ecosystems to society. So it'll be integrated fully into the ocean accounts framework and therefore being seen as important as the other domains. And we've seen a number of countries around the world pledge to develop their ocean accounts. And as part of that, that will be the social domain. And we really hope that over kind of the next few months, through the pilots and through the learnings through our social accounts working group as well, that we'll be able to develop that technical guidance so that countries will have that social account as well, and it will be seen as very, very important, and people will see the benefits of that to be able to connect up from that ecosystem to society, which will help with that decision making and management interventions. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
It's kind of like a long way, but I guess we have to start somewhere, right? So maybe to Vera, what do you think in terms of like conservation, as well? Has social has been like, I don't think it's like the core or, the starting point of what we think about, because when we talk about marine conservation, it's really about, things that lives perhaps in the water and so on. So how do you think that, would it be a core decision, this social data, or would it be like, it's like on the same level of environment and so on?
I think, well, in terms of our experience, right, and not just personal, but in terms of the literature, particularly in Southeast Asia, which I'm more familiar with actually, we have a lot of history in terms of engaging communities in terms of conservation. So, and we find that actually when you engage them at the beginning, or it starts from like community-based marine conservation, like then that's when it becomes more effective. But then unfortunately, in terms of those community-based conservation areas, they're not as good as achieving like broader ecological objectives like biodiversity conservation, like knowing all of the species, ensuring connectivity, a reef, and establishing a large enough protected area that can protect all of and represent all of these processes and species. So they're not as good as that. But if we know that the communities are really engaged and the people are also really committed, and that's when it becomes effective, because in terms of their management, it becomes sustained. So I guess in terms of our experience, it's just really trying to balance that. And so, like working with now local governments and expanding these into local government alliances that we've been doing is so that they can understand that, okay, what you've started with is good. Those small marine conservation areas are good. But what if we could do this, and if you work with your neighbors, so that way we can expand, so that way we can also address those other objectives, those ecological objectives as well. So I guess, yes, there's definitely that shift, and there's also that understanding of the need to balance both, because in terms of effectiveness from an ecological standpoint, like sustainability and persistence of the ecosystem, you need to hit those objectives. But in terms of that sustainability of the actual conservation area, we definitely need people, the governance, the social dimensions, to be more involved and along all of the different steps or phases of the process. So that way it's also sustained in terms of implementation. So yeah, I guess that's it.
So maybe what about Liz, if I can ask, what about, do you think, how because social and cultural values itself, has it been like the core, or has it been also and just an afterthought or an add-on to decision making in ocean governance itself?
I was thinking, yeah, like also in the conservation sphere, but I'll try and think like in more, I guess, my area. I guess when you think back about all like the disciplines that I've worked in, like markets and have looked at the like non economic or monetary transactions, there's been like decades of research that like points to the social and cultural decisions that go into like how we transact and how we trade. I guess it's hard to incorporate, so it has become, I guess, like those add-ons on the end of kind of like ocean governance, I guess, at the moment. I guess that they're very hard to create into indicators, understanding now how the social accounts are going about or how they're being made, makes it a little more understandable. But I guess, yeah, I guess from my experience, it's always been, yeah, they haven't been the primary or main driver. But it makes me think that also like economic value, it means like the value to the economy. So it's not just monetary value, there's social values and cultural values that give economic value. So we need to think about what economic value means. And it's not just transactional. So I think like, yeah, it's a bit of a mind shift to start thinking in that way and see it not as secondary.
Yeah, because I guess economic itself is tied to definitely social itself, but it's just that maybe it's not as clear cut as it is, right? So definitely, yeah, I was also not really thinking that, yeah, economy is all about people as well. So I guess we would love to talk more, but we're actually really nearing our end of discussion. And I think Cheryl would like to take the floor and maybe summarize what we have talked about today. I would like to thank all the speakers for a really great interaction, and also for all the audiences who have asked questions. So thank you. To you, Cheryl. You have to on your mic. You're still off. Yeah.
Yeah. I was, checking my notes because it's a very interesting and thought-provoking discussion. So I think the message today has been powerful and I think clear that the social and cultural values and all of these concepts are soft add-ons or nice to have, but in reality they're often misrepresented, I guess. So they are the very foundation of resilient and effective ocean governance. And I think if I would summarize this, there's three key insights that stand out. Community relationships, Liz mentioned about the Suki system. All of our panels also talk about participatory planning and co-design framework. And these should be the central pillars of our national and ocean governance, not just add-ons or footnotes. We also talk about trust. Let's talk about trust, and I think Vera as well. So looking at the markets and conservation space. Equity is very hard because I think we've talked about interregional equity, but there are also types of equity that are procedural equity, for example, who are included in the decision-making process. There's also access equity, gender equity, and different dimensions of equity. So it's very hard to measure, but they are also important and should be non-negotiable indicators for a healthy and resilient ocean economy. And I think the most powerful policies are built ground up, and as our speakers mentioned, and bridging the gap perhaps on the high level strategy and the lived coastal communities or the experiences from the ground. So before we conclude, a huge thank to our speakers, Liz from Stockholm Resilience Centre, Vera from Macquarie University, and of course our very own Rebecca from the University of New South Wales, and also Kyra from UMT for steering the discussion, and of course to our participants and to those who raised their questions. Some of the unanswered questions we will just take note and give to our panelists and to respond as well. So please leave your email addresses, or we'll pull that out in the for our records in the registration. So thank you very much. Let's carry the spirit of this discussion forward, and let's commit on ensuring that governance of our oceans truly reflect the diverse voices that we have. So thank you everyone, and apologies for the buffering. I guess it's after hours here in Suva, Fiji, and have a wonderful rest of your day or night. Thanks everyone, until our next regional dialogue. Bye.